Hi there, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today for the Exact Max Planning Simulation Tool overview. Let's get started. Planning Simulation is a sales tool for carrying out what-if, available to promise scenarios using existing part numbers, bills of materials, and MRP schedules for better delivery estimates. This allows a user to create simulations using real parts and existing conditions without affecting current work in process. Planning simulation uses forward scheduling to quickly answer the question, how close to an entered cutoff date can I meet the simulated demand? Now, if you promise delivery of one or more sales orders based on an available to promise date, you should immediately create orders to reserve these ATP dates in the system. Now, creating sales orders creates demand in the system, which will affect subsequent planning simulation results. On the other hand, creating quotes does not create demand. So, creating a quote will not reserve an available to promise date in the system, and it will not affect subsequent planning simulation results. You also have the ability to create sales orders or quotes from the planning simulation tool itself. And we'll see that in just a few minutes when we go through the demonstration. But it's just as easy as selecting the checkbox next to the part ID, which says Create Order, and you're able to create that order or quote that contains a specified quantity for each selected part ID. Now, a little bit of background on how this information is captured. Max uses the following supply and demand information to calculate surpluses and shortages. The supply orders include mastered scheduled orders, manufactured orders, planned orders, purchase requisitions, as well as purchase orders. And on the demand side of things, demand includes forecasted demand, dependent demand, as well as customer demand. Let's go take a look. So now that we've got the planning simulation tool open, we notice immediately that the screen is extremely easy to read and understand. We've got the familiar looking grid-like concept like a lot of the other screens in Max, and we notice a few key features across the top. The first feature I'd like to point out is the requested date. This is just a defaulted date here to display the supply and demand generated on or before this particular date. The tool will actually ignore all supply and demand generated after this date, so it allows you to keep things in check and keep your information accurate. Now, to the right of that date, we see the Create and Modify Order radio buttons. Selecting the sales order or quote allows users to enter a parent part ID in the simulated demand grid, and by checking the Create Order box, a new sales order or quote will be created. The existing option allows users to modify the quantity on an existing sales order. Then to the right, we have the On Hand button. So select the All Radio button here to project both surpluses and shortages. Alternately, select either the surplus or the shortage button to display only those amounts respectively. We then have part types here to the right, and you can select the All Radio button here to include both make or buy parts. And again, alternately, you can select the Make or Buy Radio button to display only those amounts respectively. And then finally to the top here we have the View button, which allows Max users to run the simulation combining demand shown in the consolidated demand and projected shortages grid by component part number or manufacturer's part number. Now, if the MPN view is selected, the grid will consolidate the requirements using that MPN number. Now, if we go ahead and run the planning simulation tool here, I can enter in a part number, which should actually have a full bill of material structure loaded in the system, and I can enter in a quantity and hit Run Simulation. Now, a side note here is that you can enter actually up to 500 parts in this grid, and you can see the system will instantly populate the results here, providing me with a few different areas of information. So we can see a few features here that populate as a result of running that simulation. The first thing we see here is the CPLT, the critical path lead time. Now, Max is automatically displaying the availability date for the part ID calculated as the part's critical path lead time added to today's date. We see we have the ATP, the projected available to promise date, as well as revenue. So the potential revenue for this order based on the price from the part sales table. Now the bottom portion of this screen is where we see all of our critical information involving our parent part as well as our subcomponent parts. Now we've got the description, the net required. We see here the different on-hand quantities as well as supply information. If you keep going down the right of the screen, you see we have some cost information, some available to promise dates, as well as different information in terms of your planner ID, buyer ID, and vendor ID. So with all of that, you realize you have full control and visual access to all of this information real time without actually having to make any changes. So this is great for users that need read, not write access. And finally, we see that you actually have the ability to export the data here out to Microsoft Excel. You can send it out via email as well as send it to your printer. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon in this overview presentation for the planning simulation. And if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to your account manager or any Exact Max representative. We'd be happy to figure out how this tool can help your business and how we can move forward. Thank you so much.